Hello and welcome to Community Planning Workshop 3 of the Long Island City Neighborhood Planning Process. Thank you all for coming out to follow the plan's progress and sharing your ideas. We will be going through the following at today's meeting. So at today's meeting, we'll share out what we've done to date during the neighborhood planning process. We'll review what's to come for the rest of the year and through next year. And we'll share a set of draft strategies put forth by city agencies who will begin to flesh out specific ideas for what they can bring to the neighborhood. One of the key components of the draft strategies is the draft zoning proposal, which builds on the zoning framework that was shared with you all in May. We will workshop the zoning proposal today and continue getting your feedback. Here's a high-level snapshot of what today's zoning proposal could result in. Approximately 16,000 new homes, including more than 4,000 affordable units, approximately 16,000 new jobs across multiple sectors, 7 to 9 acres of continuous new waterfront open space and new schools. The neighborhood plan proposes to support the growth of existing businesses, protect existing tenants, and seek improvements to local parks and NYCHA communities. The proposal seeks to support major infrastructure upgrades, create vibrant and safer streets, a more resilient shoreline, more greenery, and an expanded urban canopy. For anyone new to this process, 1LIC is a holistic planning process to gain input and build consensus on key neighborhood challenges and opportunities toward the development of a Long Island City neighborhood plan. The neighborhood plan will include a set of policies, capital projects, and programs and services to ensure that we center quality of life for existing and new residents. It will also include changes to land use regulations or zoning. The study area outlined here in red is the area being considered for zoning changes. At the May meetings, we shared the draft land use framework for this area. The proposal that we'll share today contains more details on the proposed zoning changes. While zoning changes would only be proposed for the study area, this process will result in a set of policies, capital projects, programs, and services from multiple city agencies that could apply throughout this larger context area as well. We'll refer to these as draft strategies, and they may apply throughout this entire circled area. We will share the initial draft strategies today. Here's a look at the overall planning process. We're about 1/3 of the way into our timeline. Since November, we've received over 3,750 public comments. This input has been used to develop a set of shared goals for the neighborhood plan and a set of community recommendations that summarizes the issues, opportunities, and priorities you've shared. In response to these community recommendations, city agencies have now developed a set of draft strategies. There are now 2 parallel tracks that this plan will follow. Along the top in green are the non-zoning draft strategies, and along the bottom in pink are the zoning changes being proposed. Starting at the top in green, the non-zoning draft strategies that city agencies are beginning to develop into specific initiatives will advance the plan's shared goals and respond to community recommendations. Those include things like policy changes, new infrastructure projects and community facilities, and improvements to public services. At this stage, the draft strategies are high level, as we want to review and analyze the specific ideas that you've put forth. They will be refined over the coming months, and all of the individual comments that have been recorded will be considered as we advance. Additional public engagement will happen in the coming months, and eventually these draft strategies will be developed into specific proposals for new policies, capital projects, programs, and services. Some of this engagement includes traditional hearings where members of the public will be able to submit spoken testimony. Many of you have asked about planning for the city's city-owned sites, so I want to address this specific concern. We will be conducting deeper and more detailed engagement for the city-owned sites and buildings on the waterfront to more fully understand community priorities. These ideas will be weighed against the realities of various constraints and considerations, such as design best practices, ensuring the continuity of existing city operations, and the costs associated with different outcomes. All of these are factors in how to best unlock these sites. This fall, we will continue to hear from community to memorialize these community recommendations, which will be used in any future RFP for the development of these sites, as well as a guiding document for investments and design in this important waterfront area. Now moving to the bottom track in pink, which represents the proposed zoning changes. The zoning proposal will be shared tonight. We'll go through the environmental review process, also known as SEEKR, to identify the potential effects those changes may have on the environment. We will share more details on SEEKR and what that is shortly, and how you can participate. In the coming months, we'll develop and refine both the non-zoning strategies and the zoning proposal. They will come together into the draft neighborhood plan at certification. Certification happens at the City Planning Commission. It kicks off the formal public review process known as ULURP. We will share more details on ULURP shortly and how you can participate. The ultimate outcome of this process will be a neighborhood plan, which includes specific policies, capital projects, programs, and services from various city agencies, as well as zoning changes that would be adopted. It's important to note that this represents our best guess at the timeline ahead. These are complex processes and things may shift as we advance. Community recommendations. The community recommendations that have informed the development of the draft strategies we're sharing today. The draft strategies can be found at documents that are circulated to discussion tables as well as mounting boards, all of which will be posted online at the project website, licplan.nyc. They are also included in booklets that will be posted to the website as well. You can access the draft strategies directly online at licplan.nyc or use the QR code on screen. When you get to the website, go to Building the Plan and click on Draft Strategies. As I stated before, these draft strategies represent the beginning of a process that city agencies will go through in order to develop specific non-zoning ideas and a zoning proposal that will advance the shared goals and respond to the community's recommendations. In the coming months, while the zoning proposal advances through environmental review, there will be additional opportunities to workshop these draft strategies by bringing you into conversation with city agencies. The proposals that will be captured in the draft neighborhood plan represent a chance to plan holistically for the area's future by coordinating investments across multiple agencies. We can address things like open space access, investments in cultural amenities, educational resources, and infrastructure like schools and streets. Now let's discuss the draft zoning proposal. Here is the existing zoning in the study area, along with some of the issues and opportunities that we've heard. The existing zoning is a barrier to addressing these kinds of issues. For example, the waterfront zoning regulations that have been in place since 1997 do require that new development provides new publicly accessible space along the river. However, it's been over 25 years since those requirements were adopted, and the underlying zoning has not resulted in new development. Therefore, the open space has not been delivered. The industrial and commercial zoning located to the east of Queensbridge Houses presents a barrier between residents and the rest of the neighborhood to the east. Changing the zoning can help better connect the area with new housing opportunities as well as jobs and services. The industrial and commercial zone also limits new development for existing businesses that want to grow and new businesses that want to locate in Long Island City. And while a significant amount of housing has been produced in the area, it does not have any affordability requirement and is predominantly market rate. Here is the draft land use framework that we shared with you at the last round of meetings in May. Today, we will also share a more detailed zoning proposal that builds on this framework, including the specific zoning districts with their maximum densities. We collected feedback during the meetings in May and will continue to collect your feedback today. Collectively, that feedback will help the city improve the zoning proposal in the coming months. We will now go through each of the 4 sub-areas shortly, but before doing so, we'll share some high-level feedback that we received that applies across the entire study area. We heard concerns that the proposal would not result in a neighborhood focal point, something like a town center. Some felt that Vernon Boulevard can be better leveraged as a central corridor in the neighborhood. We heard that more non-residential uses like businesses and community facilities are needed. There were questions about the number of affordable housing units that might be produced generally, and if those would be located near transit. Some felt that the proposed density would do well to produce a lot of affordable units through the city's Mandatory Inclusionary Housing Program, or MIH, while others did not think that MIH does enough for the people who need housing the most. There were questions about how zoning changes could support more active ground floors to generate more foot traffic for small businesses and increase vibrancy. Here is the more detailed zoning map, which includes specific zoning districts and their boundaries. This drawing is available at each discussion table and is available online at the project website. There's a lot here, so we'll take a look at sections of the study area one at a time. Like we did at the last meeting, we'll break the framework down into these 4 sub-areas. 1, waterfront. 2, the northern portion around Queensbridge houses. 3, industrial and commercial area. And 4, the mixed-use areas to the south and near Court Square together. Starting at the waterfront, there was a lot of excitement about a continuous public waterfront and concern that plans not to change the northern part may be short-sighted and may prevent waterfront continuity. We heard hopes to further break up waterfront blocks to allow for more access to the river. Some folks felt the high-density mixed use proposed around Annabelle Basin is too much development, while others saw the waterfront as an ideal location for high-density development. It seemed that most people do want to see a mix of uses here with active ground floors and not just residential buildings. As we shared at the last meeting, in the zoning proposal, the areas on the southern half of the waterfront around Annabelle Basin will allow for high-density mixed-use buildings that accommodate all uses, including residential. This diagram will be printed on tables and is available online and shows the envelope that new buildings would have to fit inside, as well as the proposed maximum densities. On the left here is a photo of Vernon Boulevard and Annabelle Basin today. There's no public waterfront access to the basin, among other existing conditions that deter the public from accessing open space, including a lack of pedestrian crossings. With the proposed changes, we anticipate new development that would include housing with units that are permanently income restricted. We anticipate both visual and physical access to new waterfront open space that would be developed around the basin, and regulations along the waterfront with flood resiliency measures in place that include pervious surfaces and stormwater management. In the environmental review, the city can also analyze traffic conditions that will help to inform if measures like new pedestrian crossing locations and traffic signals are needed to connect people safely through and across Vernon Boulevard to the waterfront. In the north area, next to Queensbridge houses, we saw hopes for more employment opportunities and those who want to keep industrial uses in the area, those who felt that the proposed density may be too high, and concerns that the area feels dead today, and questions about why only 2 blocks in red are proposed for mixed-use development that would include new residential uses. The proposed zoning districts next to Queensbridge houses here would allow for medium-density manufacturing in the northern area that's shown in purple, and high-density mixed-use buildings, including residential, between 41st Avenue and Queens Plaza North. In the industrial and commercial area, there is concern that the proposed zoning will not support enough street activity with active ground floors to support small businesses. We heard that this area feels disconnected from Queensbridge houses and the blocks to the north. Some people raised concerns that the plan does not adequately address the people who already live in the industrial business zone, the IBZ, in homes that existed before the current M districts were mapped here. And we heard from many folks who want to see new housing permitted in this area. In the industrial and commercial area, the darker purple around the edge would allow for medium to high density industrial and commercial development. The lighter purple area in the center would allow for medium density industrial and commercial uses with a preference for industrial space. All areas here would allow for higher density development than they do today, and would continue to restrict new residential from being developed. Finally, in the blocks south of the industrial business zone and around Court Square, there were hopes to see more housing and higher density development along 44th Drive to encourage a corridor with active shops. We also heard concerns that the blocks around Court Square in particular are in need of more open space, and this plan does not seem to address that. Please note that each of the corresponding sub-area discussion tables will have printouts of this feedback available for your reference, as well as available as PDFs online. for discussion and comment on the proposed zoning. A look at the detailed proposed zoning in this area. Around Court Square, the city is proposing high-density mixed-use development. Along 44th Drive, medium-density mixed use is proposed. And in the areas south of 44th Drive, medium to lower density buildings transition into the existing neighborhood fabric. On the left is an image looking at 44th Drive and Gordon Triangle, where we know existing conditions, preference access for vehicles over pedestrians and cyclists. The area has low-density industrial uses, despite being just 3 blocks from the subway. With the proposed rezoning, we're able to explore more opportunities for safe pedestrian crossings, protected bike lanes, and other public realm improvements. In this visualization, you can see how multimodal access to and from Court Square may be improved, and how higher density development along 44th Drive can allow for expanded housing and job opportunities. Now let's take a moment to talk about some of the things we heard from the community that we do not anticipate will advance through this process. First, a lot of people have asked, why can't we allow residential in the industrial business zone? The city is standing by its citywide commitment to keep new residential uses out of the industrial business zones and retain them for non-residential uses that provide jobs and services. However, an important part of this neighborhood plan will be to support greater business growth and overall investment in the area. Separately, the city is due to publish an industrial action plan next year, and this may be an opportunity to rethink the IBZ policy on a larger scale, which may also impact LIC in the future. Secondly, some people have asked, why isn't the city only allowing for low or medium density development? In the city's assessment, this area is ideally suited for higher densities, with Long Island City's public transportation access and proximity to Midtown Manhattan. Places close to the study area at Hunters Point South and Court Square also support higher density development today, which puts the proposed density in a similar context. Another question we have received, why can't we prohibit new development in the flood zone through managed retreat? We know that many of you are concerned about the possibility of new high-density residential construction along the waterfront and in the floodplain. We understand this concern, but believe that the proposed approach to develop a resilient shoreline is a stronger approach that also advances multiple shared goals. We know that no waterfront barrier or sewer expansion will completely prevent flooding in major storm events. However, without waterfront redevelopment, there is very limited potential to add new public space and flood resiliency measures. An updated waterfront access plan and regulatory codes for shoreline construction will help protect the neighborhood from some coastal flooding by raising the shoreline and introducing a mix of engineered and natural storm surge mitigation techniques. We know this may not assuage everyone's concerns, but please know that this will be studied in depth as part of the environmental review process. Finally, we heard from a minority of folks who asked, what if I'm opposed to any rezoning in the area? I assure you we have heard you, but the city believes that in order to advance the shared goals of the neighborhood plan in a meaningful way, rather than continue the status quo, a rezoning proposal is needed. We are working to ensure that new development is accompanied by the investments needed to support the neighborhood as it grows. Now let's discuss the environmental review process that the proposed zoning changes would go through next. Major public projects generally require an environmental impact statement, or an EIS. That includes the proposed land use changes. The EIS estimates the impacts of proposed changes on a variety of factors, everything from traffic volume and school capacity to impacts on natural resources and energy use. The results of the study inform the kinds of investments the government may need to make in order to account for new growth. The City Environmental Quality Review, or SEQR for short, CEQR, is the name of the city's environmental review process. SEQR allows participants in the public review process to evaluate project benefits and the new needs that they might produce. It also ensures mitigation measures are identified for adverse environmental impacts. EIS studies are comprehensive and can address a wide variety of impacts from land use and zoning changes. That includes socioeconomic conditions, open space, natural resources, infrastructure, traffic and parking, and public health concerns, to name a few. The public plays an important role in the environmental assessment through the scoping process. The city's first step will be to share what they plan to study. This is the draft scope of work, or DSOW. It explains how the environmental analysis will be conducted and identifies initial impacts under this umbrella. We will update licplan.nyc when the draft scope of work is published, which we anticipate being in July. After the release of the draft scope of work, a public scoping hearing must be held within 30 to 45 days, where the proposal is shared and members of the public provide insight and feedback on areas that need to be studied. So if you are concerned about a potential effect of changes to zoning, scoping will be the place to come out and make that known. We anticipate the scoping hearing will happen in August. The scoping hearing will be held virtually online. In addition to attending the scoping hearing online, you will also have the option to submit written comments on the draft scope of work until 10 days after the scoping hearing. After the scoping meeting and the public review process, a final scope of work is produced that incorporates the public feedback. Once the final scope of work is issued, there will be several months of analysis and detailed research in partnership with other agencies that's produced. A draft EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, is produced to disclose environmental data for public comments before the certification of the neighborhood study. And both the draft EIS and the land use application enter the formal uniform land use review process. Following this comment period, a final EIS is issued that incorporates feedback from the public and is shared 10 days before the City Planning Commission hearing. At City Council, the final EIS, FEIS, is a document that captures the scope and comments of all members of the public. Running parallel to the EIS is the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, or ULURP. ULURP is a standardized procedure for the public review of land use applications involving feedback from the public, city agencies, and local elected officials. ULURP begins at certification, where the Department of City Planning will present the neighborhood plan, including the zoning proposal, to the City Planning Commission. The proposal will be referred out to Community Board 1 and Community Board 2 for a 60-day review period. During that time, both community boards will have the opportunity to hold a public hearing where members of the public will be able to submit verbal or written testimony to inform each community board's formal recommendation. Following the community board review, the proposal will advance to the borough president for a 30-day review period. A public hearing will be held where members of the public will again be able to submit verbal or written testimony to inform the borough president's formal recommendation. Then the proposal returns to the City Planning Commission for a 60-day review period. Another public hearing will be held where members of the public will be able to submit verbal and written testimony. The City Planning Commission will consider this testimony as well as the recommendations from both community boards and the borough president to inform their vote. Then, City Council will have 50 days to review the proposal. They will hold a public hearing where members of the public will be able to submit verbal or written testimony to inform the City Council's vote. In addition to an EIS and ULURP, every major rezoning since 2021 is required to produce a racial equity report. This helps to measure the potential changes to the neighborhood's demographics and helps to ensure that land use changes will support equitable and diverse community growth. Now, before moving into the discussion, we want to acknowledge all the work that has gone into this process so far from you all members of the public and all the folks who've joined us at these meetings and submitted public comments so far. Since last October, over 1,200 of you have joined us at 15 meetings, sharing more than 3,700 comments about the future of Long Island City. Thank you for your time, passion, and your ideas. We appreciate your input to this process, and we'll be sure to include it as we work to develop and improve this proposal for the future of Long Island City.